Man, we keep on talking about this guy, don't we? And it seems to be just a tour of teams that I feel are worth talking about, that we just end up incorporating this dude into the conversation every single time. Like, we talked about Edmonton, we've been talking about Ottawa this entire time, we talked about a whole bunch of other teams, but now we're going over this player and a link to another team that I'm honestly kind of surprised to see. But based off of the explanation that we have been given via Aaron Portzline in The Athletic, it appears that this is a new thing, and that my idea in my head where I was like, oh, he probably wouldn't want to go there, was correct as of a few weeks ago. So let's go over Arizona Coyotes defenseman star Jakob Chychrun and how he might just be linked to the Columbus Blue Jackets of all teams ever since the Johnny Gaudreau signing. Now, if you need a little bit of a scouting report on Jake Chychrun, then go to any of the other videos we've made. We've made like, I think 20 at this point over the past year and a bit. Long story short, he's a defenseman, he's pretty good, he can score goals, he can create points, he's good in his own end, and he's on a pretty good contract too. He's only making $4.6 million a season till the end of 2025, and you could debate this player is a legit top 2 defenseman. Top 4 at the very least, maybe top 3 if you wanted to push it, but top 2 on some NHL teams. Because he had requested a trade earlier in this offseason, and because we had ourselves some updates from guys like Darren Dreger, etc., saying that he could be linked to teams like the Oilers, the Kings, the Senators, the Blues, and the Blue Jackets, in my mind, Columbus was the interesting one. Because when it comes to Ottawa, we had talked about Chychrun and Ottawa for a while. When it comes to Toronto, they're linked to every player that happens to be good under the sun and behind the moon, so it made sense to me that Toronto would have been involved in these discussions. You had yourselves the Oilers, who were kind of in a similar situation, and we had explored a bigger idea as to Chychrun and Edmonton a few days ago. The Kings, the Blues, I guess you could say the same thing, and then when it comes to the Blue Jackets, in my mind, there was always sort of this idea saying, hey, Columbus is not really one of the top teams. They're not a Toronto. They're not a St. Louis. They're not an Edmonton making the third round in the playoffs. Columbus being involved in Chychrun is quite interesting because I didn't really think at first glance that this would be a team that would be sort of worth mentioning in any sort of Jake Chychrun trade conversation. But then we had ourselves Aaron Portzline on an article on The Athletic from the other day that went over the entire scoop as to why this happened. Now, I don't normally like to screenshot things from The Athletic and put it on the channel, but this entire thing from the article was published on the Blue Jackets subreddit, and because it's here, now it's out in the open, and it's like, okay, now I can just show the Reddit post rather than showing off the actual article. The link will be in the description if you want to go ahead and read the article yourself, but this is what is indeed written by Portzline. The one person who is said to have quashed a deal to Columbus before it could ever come together was Chychrun himself. It is known that Chychrun has asked to be traded by the NHL's most wayward organization, but he's also further requested that he lands with a club that is seen as having playoff aspirations. To be clear, Chychrun does not have a no-trade clause in his contract, but the Blue Jackets know better than to trade for a player who doesn't want to play in the city. We all remember Jeff Carter, right? As of early July, so a few months ago, according to one source, Chychrun did not fancy the Blue Jackets as a playoff club in 22-23. And then Johnny Hockey appeared. On July 13th, the Blue Jackets signed Gaudreau to a 7-year contract, yada yada yada. It kind of stunned the hockey world. And in response to that move, Chychrun informed those close to him, according to sources, that Columbus was now a place he would be willing to join. So you know how whenever a free agent signs with a team, there always is a lot more hope from the fans, not just because of Johnny Gaudreau himself per se, not because strictly of the player that is coming over, but because there's a little bit of an added level of attraction there. Oh, my team is attractive enough that Johnny Gaudreau wants to come here. What does that say to future NHL free agents who want to sign elsewhere? What does that say to other players that may want a trade from their own team that happen to be good? If they look at our team and say, hey, Johnny Gaudreau went there. I mean, firstly, something had to have been there for Johnny Gaudreau to want to go there in the first place, and secondly, Johnny Gaudreau is now there. It's a double whammy of added attraction to your hockey team. I remember when Kuzmenko signed with Vancouver, this was just a few months ago, so why the heck am I saying it like as if it was a few years ago, but still, when Kuzmenko signed in Vancouver, a lot of Canucks fans were like, hey, we all of a sudden are a destination to want to play for. We have players that want to come here, and now Mikheyev's here too. We have Podkolzin. There's a realistic possibility now that when other players look at our team, they might say, hey, Kuzmenko went over to that squad. Maybe I could go there too. Now, for Columbus, obviously, it's different with Johnny Gaudreau. Johnny Gaudreau is not Andrei Kuzmenko, for crying out loud, but just the magnitude of Gaudreau and what he could bring to an organization. The guy was tied for second in NHL points last year. And so if you're Jake Chychrun, I mean, it makes a lot of sense where he's like, oh, Columbus, eh? I wasn't interested back then, but hey, I'm kind of interested now. Korchinski, we could be splitting the load on the left side because he's a really good left-handed defenseman. I'm a really good left-handed defenseman. I could be feeding passes up to Gaudreau, and that could be pretty cool. Honestly, I kind of debate in my head, like, there was somewhat of a problem with Jake Chychrun last year because of the power play. Shane Gostisbehere took that #1 spot away from Jake, and if he goes over to Columbus, what's going to happen on that blue line for the power play there? Korchinski or Chychrun? I don't know. But either way, there are other conversations that I've seen popping up here and there, especially on forums like the Columbus Blue Jackets subreddit saying, hey, it's cool that he wants to come here now, but why would we want to do that? I mean, he didn't want to come here earlier. Does he really want to come here now just because we signed one guy? That's kind of a backhanded sort of, oh, your team is not really all too great. I'm only coming here because of the one player type of debate, I guess you could say. Then there's the entire idea of, hey, you still got Jiricek, you still got Matejchuk, a lot of young defenders that are coming into the system. Do you really want to go out there and really focus on the now with a guy like Chychrun coming in? I don't want to make it seem like if you get Chychrun, you can't necessarily focus on the future too, because he is signed till 2025, but it would make sense in theory if you, as the Blue Jackets, would want to push your window of opportunity, your window of contention sometime down in the future, rather than opening it up right now with a Chychrun trade. Because if you traded away a prospect and a pick, that pulls your window back a little closer to today. You could debate whether or not that's the right move, but at the same time, when it comes to Jarmo Kekalainen himself, he has made a few game-changing moves over the years to really push the Blue Jackets into contention's territory immediately. You talk about Matt Duchene, you talk about Panarin, Ryan Dzingel, everybody that they had on that team when they beat the President's Trophy-winning Tampa Bay Lightning squad in 4 games. Jarmo Kekalainen is an unpredictable beast sometimes, and now I'm all of a sudden super intrigued as to how these conversations are going to go, because if you had seen the behind-the-scenes video when Johnny Gaudreau signed with the Blue Jackets in the first place, it came out of nowhere in Columbus as well. Like, I know Bob McKenzie kind of reported earlier at the first day of free agency that, yeah, Columbus might be involved here, but, like, if you watch the video, it was pretty out of nowhere. Kekalainen was on the phone. He's like, yeah, we got Johnny on the phone. We want to talk to him. Let's talk to him. And then they just got it done. I don't know. I'm kind of scared to negotiate with Jarmo Kekalainen because I feel like when he wants something, he just goes out there and he ends up getting it. So if Jakob Chychrun is legitimately like, yeah, I kind of want to go there now, it wouldn't surprise me if Jarmo Kekalainen was like, oh, really? A guy of his caliber wants to come here. What can we give up to get him? So, I don't know. You can talk to the comments your thoughts about the wishy-washy, the fickleness of Jakob Chychrun not wanting to come to Columbus and eventually wanting to come to Columbus after Johnny Gaudreau signed with the team. Do you think that's kind of fair? Do you think it's unfair? It's understandable for sure, but what are your opinions on the optics behind that? And where do you think Chychrun ultimately ends up? I don't want to go out there and place any bets because there are so many teams that are out there in on this guy. Toronto, Ottawa, Edmonton, now Columbus, LA, and St. Louis too. Darren Dreger listed a laundry list of teams that are there, but talk to the comments either way, all your thoughts though. If you're a Coyotes fan, what would you want from the Blue Jackets? And if you're a Columbus fan, what would you want to give up in any sort of Chychrun trade? Or do you even want to give up anything for a Chychrun trade? Do you want to do this trade at all? Talk to the comments all your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. Juraj 99. And bye.